Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wellington Hepburn, and I am the president of Wellington Hepburn International. And I really want to welcome you. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this session. I really want to welcome you to the 8th session in our transition series, which is entitled The Data Literacy Imperative, Data as a Second Language. Liz, I just want to put you on guard now. If you hear me go quiet and you just don't hear from me, it's because I have officially transitioned as a participant, not a host. Because I just want to take in all this content. This content is good. Listen, if some of the names that I see on our participant list, you've been with us throughout this whole journey. So you know what we're trying to achieve. It's all about building capability and helping individuals to go faster, further, longer, stronger. And when we think about capability, I struggle to think of a competency that may be more important than this one. And it's understanding data, appreciating data, and being able to use data to paint a story, to persuade, to negotiate, and to inform business decisions. Categorically important. So today we're going to get into that. And before I monopolize, see Liz, I already getting excited. Oh my gosh. So let me kick off our series and our episode correctly. So let's get into our official entrance video, and then we'll hear some introductions, some further introductions from myself and also from our panel. So give me one moment and I will play our entrance video. Our world has changed, and that has impacted the way that we live and the way that we work. And as we look over the changes that we've gone through over the past year, we have to stop and say, do the skills that we have now still allow us to be effective in this new normal? Can we perform at our best? And the answer is no. We need to have new skills, new competencies in order to be effective in this new normal. And through this workshop series, we will cover 10 competencies that will allow us to achieve excellence and to maintain high performance. If the world has shifted and adapted, we too need to shift, adapt, and transition. Welcome to the Transition Series. All right. So, like I said before, I am Wellington Hepburn, president for Wellington Hepburn International. And today we are at our 8th episode in the transition series. Before I hand it over to our co-host, Elizabeth Longley, and also to our featured panelists to introduce themselves, I just want to set a few meeting guidelines, all of which you're aware, because all of you have been on Zoom meetings before. I would strongly encourage you to keep your mics on mute. We want to make sure that all of us that are here get to participate and learn as best as we can without any interruptions. Please know that the flow of today's event is that we are going to have a structured interview segment with our 3 experts. And then after that, we're going to have a Q&A session where we give you 30 minutes because we know that this is a heavy topic and we really want to allow you enough time to get your questions answered. So we're dedicating a full 30 minutes for you to get your Q&A answered. Please note that because this topic is so heavy, we made a decision not to do the demo for today. So if any of you are interested in seeing a demo of data analytics or data visualization software, you can reach out to our team and we can provide some contacts. But we felt that it would be more value in the discussion and understanding the framework and the philosophies behind it instead of seeing a tool. So know that for today's segment, the first hour will be a structured interview segment, and then after that, we'll have Q&A. Thirdly, you would notice that I'm recording this session, so I do want you to be aware of that and be transparent. The intent is to post it on our WHI YouTube channel so that individuals that could not make it here today can still watch it and still learn and grow and be better for the future. And last, this hasn't happened in a while, but I think I'll still touch on it again from a contingency planning standpoint. If we have a Zoom bombing event where an individual or individuals come onto the webinar, do some unsavory things, although we don't anticipate it, know that I will end the Zoom immediately. I have all of your email contacts as a part of the registration process. And within 5 minutes, I'll alert you as to what our next steps would be. All right. So learn, grow. I am surely excited about this session because for me, like Dr. Davis will introduce himself by saying, I am a data geek. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Outside of HR, that's my thing. So over to you, Liz, to introduce yourself and then to allow our panelists to introduce themselves.
Sure. Thank you, Wellington. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm also very excited to be a part of this conversation today as I learn a lot more about the importance and relevance of data literacy. I'm a senior HR professional, certified change management practitioner, and just a lover for learning and education. It is certainly a delight to co-host the session today, and I'll now pass it on to our first presenter, who is Ms. Rhonda Rolle.
Drum roll,
Good
please.
afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Wellington and Liz, for the invite to participate in this session today. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer at AML Foods. Been in this HR field for about 24 years. And over the years, I have actually seen this HR profession evolve from one where we made decisions based on our gut and our intuition to one where we are now using the data that we have available to us to help to manage our employee initiatives. So I'm excited to be able to share some of what we're doing at AML, as it relates to HR and data.
Absolutely. Rhonda, I have to interrupt you. You said you've been in HR for 24 years. You only look 24, Rhonda.
I know. It's been a long journey, it's been a long journey. And I guess, you have to love it. And if you don't love it, then it weighs you down. So I must love it.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next presenter, Ms. Neisha Butler. Mrs. Neisha Butler.
Hi, everyone. I'm Neisha Butler. I am the CFO at BTC. And BTC has been a company that has been on an incredible transformation journey for the time that I've been with it. And my path to being a CFO is really non-traditional. My background and my formal education is actually in information engineering. And so I take a lot of that knowledge of information and systems and data, and I bring this into the role. And a company that goes for a transformation like BTC makes a million decisions a day on its future and its strategy. And data is really a key tenet in how we approach those problems. Absolutely. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the discussion as well.
Welcome. And next we have Dr. Danny Davis.
I feel like saying the legend, Dr. Danny Davis, but I won't say that. I won't say that.
Let's not say that then. So, good afternoon all. Danny Davis. I am the Assistant VP of Institutional Strengthening and Accreditation at the University of the Bahamas. Used to be the registrar at one point at the university. I have a PhD in organic chemistry, which means as a science student, data has been a part of my life for a long time. Prior to UB, I worked at the pharmaceutical company, two pharmaceutical companies in Grand Bahama, Franklin Chemicals and Pharmachem. During that time, I was actually trained as a process improvement in the Six Sigma methodology at the black belt level. So that reinforced my love for data and the relevance of data to everyday decisions. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here today. And as Wellington said, yeah, I shamelessly classify myself as a data geek. No problem there. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Welcome. Thank you, Dr. Davis. So I'd like to share with you how I've partnered with WHI simply because we have shared interest. We agree that it's important for us to realize the potential of individuals, and we've committed our lives with sharing our passions and helping others reveal their best selves. The transition series composes of 10 competencies that focuses on main areas that business professionals can grow in. We found these areas to be most relevant in light of our challenging times, and we really wanted to emphasize how important it is to understand each of them and how you can take practical skills and make them relevant in your respective areas of work. So it's been quite a journey. I'm very proud of the team and how far we've come along. We started in October with the execution difference, why businesses rise or fall. And then we've gone down every week, more or less, and we're now at our data literacy. Down here Sunday, December 6th, data as our second language. So I just want you to have an appreciation for the context of this framework and really think through today as we go through the data literacy topic on how it can be relevant for you in your respective areas of work or professions. We are again delighted to have you in our conversation today, and we look forward to your questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat. You can share it with the group. You can send it to me separately, send it to Wellington separately. Just know that we want to hear from you just as much as we'd like to hear from our presenters today. So without further ado, presenters, if you are ready.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll. Here we go. So our topic is data literacy. In your own words, and I mean practically speaking now, not techie language as much as we can avoid it, if you can break it down in the simplest form, what does data literacy mean and why is it important to you?
So to me, there's really kind of five tenets of data literacy. And the first and the most basic is an understanding and a knowledge of the data that's encompassed in all of the systems that your company uses. And you'd be surprised at the amount of data that systems from your point of sale systems to your financial systems accumulate in the course of your day-to-day activities. So first thing, knowledge of the data that's stored in these variety of systems. The second one I would say is a mastery of what is called the data pyramid. And there are many different versions of the data pyramid, but I will explain the version that I use a lot in the way that I work. And if you think of a pyramid, you know, with a big base and a small top, the first layer of the pyramid of any data pyramid is data. And there's tons of data in our organizations. There's tons of data across the world. And the next layer about that is how do you turn that data into information that's useful to you and your company. And then the layer just above that is that information gives you and gains knowledge about your business and your customers and your products and your services. And that knowledge takes you even further up the value chain, which is insight and real intimacy with your business, your operations, and your customers. And then the tip of the iceberg for data pyramids for me is prediction. You take this knowledge and this data and this information and you use it to predict to the best of your ability the future and make smart business decisions from that. So once you have the knowledge of the data, you have the mastery of this pyramid and how you move up the value chain in data, then the next step is to have a great understanding of the common tools used for data manipulation, which gives you the end game. And the end game for all companies is how do you make data-driven business decisions?
I think you're on, okay.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Neisha. Would any of our other presenters like to chime in? What does data literacy mean to you? I see that smile, Dr. Davis.
Yeah, that smile.
I was thinking there's a beautiful answer, and I don't think I don't want to follow that answer. That sums it up nicely, absolutely nicely.
Fair enough. Yes. We can roll on to the next one.
Indeed. But in as much as you gave us such that lovely smile, I'll throw the second question at you, Dr. Davis. You know, the title of this session is the Data Literacy Imperative, Data as a Second Language, right? And, you know, when I think about a second language or when I think about data, I think about using it consistently and using it fluently. You know, it's not an ad hoc, one-of-the-mill type thing that you use just once and never come back to it. You know, what's your view on that? Why does data need to be a second language now? Why is this an imperative now for HR and business folks?
That's an interesting question, especially to someone who doesn't have a second language in the traditional sense, a Spanish or French or something else like that. And I'm amazed at individuals who do have a second language and watch how they switch across from one to the other. Is no transition. You don't notice a transition. The only reason I notice a transition because I don't understand. Then I realized that they've switched the language on me. And I think with data and using it in our life as a second language, it should be the same way. We shouldn't have to consciously make this switch to say, okay, we can use the data to make a decision. That should be interwoven in how we do things and on a regular basis, such that we don't even notice the switch. The two of them are intertwined. So I agree with the statement wholeheartedly that definitely we want to have it as a second language and we want to be fluent. We don't want to be fumbling for the next word in the sentence. Meanwhile, having said that, the good thing about that is you start off fumbling for the next word. You know something? After a little while, you become fluent. So this is something that you have to use, integrate, it becomes a part of you, and then that you get to see the power of this move. But at first, like any language, you have to learn to conjugate the verbs, and that's never fun. I have horror of Spanish in that regard. So yeah, embrace it, I think.
Yeah, it's a real thing. You know, when you talk about second language, my wife is East African Canadian, right? So she was born in Tanzania, and she and her family, they were ambassadors to Tanzania in Ottawa for like 20 years. And, you know, sometimes I would listen to Rose, her name is Rose, talking to her mom on the phone, and they'll just switch between English and Swahili. I'm like, what are you saying? You know, and it's just so natural for them, you know, and when I think about this question, that is what I think about when it comes to data. It needs to be natural. It needs to be something that's so ingrained in you that it doesn't have to be forced. It's like a way of life. It's like a way of life.
Yeah, and also see when something becomes a really good second language for you, you start to think in that language as well and dream in that language. And that's when you know you really are into data and data literacy, when you start to have dreams about data and what you can do with it.
Yeah, it's and Liz, I'll hand it over to you after this comment, but it's crazy you say that because I've been trying to learn Swahili over the course of this year and last year. Been hit and miss, work has been busy, WHI has been busy. But for the words I know, when I listen to Swahili songs, I'm like, oh, I know that word. I know that phrase. He's talking about love, you know, so it's almost like building blocks, right? And once you continue to build on it, it connects all the disparate pieces. Over to you, Liz.
Sí, muchas gracias, Wellington. So that's as far as my Spanish goes. Hopefully my data literacy language will evolve a bit faster than that. So appreciating that data skills have evolved over the years, just naturally because of the way that businesses have evolved, the way the technology has evolved. What do the skills required for data literacy look like from your perspective? What does that even mean? And how does someone demonstrate data literacy? I will tackle Rhonda Rolle. What do you think?
Hi, Liz. You know, when we think of data literacy today, you know, it's moved so far beyond just the finance and the IT scope. You know, in the past, it was finance that crunched the numbers, and it was IT that helped to pull it together. Now it's moved and it's evolved where every aspect of the business needs to have some literacy when it comes to data to be able to make those business decisions and to be relevant, you know, in the scope of business. So I would say that first and foremost, the skills that you would need is you need to not be afraid of the technology. You know, you need the technology enabled to help you to capture the information that you need quicker and to be able to manipulate that information. So you do need that technical capability, as well as you need to be able to process the information and make sound decisions. So definitely critical thinking is a skill that is needed, as well as, you know, problem solving. You have to be able to draw conclusions and bring solutions. So definitely the problem solving skill is necessary. And, you know, as much as HR people do not like statistics, you know, you do need that basic statistical knowledge to be able to understand and compile that data set and know exactly what it means. You have to be able to make those predictions and assumptions using the data. So I would say, you know, the technical capabilities needed, the critical skills is needed, the problem solving is needed, and that understanding statistics. You got to have a little bit of that statistical knowledge.
May just add a supporting question to that. And would you be able to share with us how you were able to develop these specific skills? Because as you alluded to, they're not your traditional areas of focus, but certainly they're important at this point. So if you can help us understand a little bit how you got to your literacy.
You know, for me, I would be honest with you, if I were not in HR, I probably would have been in accounts. You know, you do just have that natural inclination or knack for numbers. You know, so I would say to a lot of HR people, it's not to be afraid of the numbers. You know, like I said, if it had not been HR, it would have been accounts.
So you've got a natural knack for it.
I like it. You know, it's not something that I find intimidating. Let me say that.
Good. Thank you for sharing that, Wellington.
And you know, that is, boy, this is an interesting topic, you know, Rhonda, because I actually started off in accounts. So I used to be at Deloitte & Touche, internal auditor, you know, did a little bit of consulting and some of the forensic stuff. And then at one point, I mean, I liked it. You know, when you like something, but you don't love it. And then my supervisor at the time said to me, she said, you know, you're pretty good with people. Have you thought about HR? I'm like, HR? No, man. You know, because back then, right, guys never used to be as in tuned with HR. So I'm like, nah, that's for females, you know. And I remember going into HR in 2004, and I loved it. And I remember clearly sitting at my desk at Atlantis. I was an analyst then, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stay in this profession for a minute. I'm going to stay here for a while. So it's just interesting to hear you say that, you know, because there are complementary skills that can cut across different skill sets and different industries and have different applications. So I want to continue that question, and I'll kind of pass this one to Neisha. You know, you heard Rhonda, or we heard Rhonda talk about some of the hard skills, right? You know, statistics, data knowledge, those type of things. What do you feel are some of the maybe softer complementary skills? You know, someone said to me a couple of years back, they said that analytics individuals need to be curious. You want to be able to see a problem and see how you could use data to bridge the gap. But that has to start with curiosity. So what are some additional complementary skills that come to your mind, Neisha, that could add to data literacy?
Curiosity is a great one, right? With the advent of big data, and big data is really about having this ability to interrogate and ask questions to really large data sets. But with the advent of big data, I read somewhere that it's not about what answers are available anymore. It's about what question do you ask? What is the right question to ask and to frame that question in a way to get the answers that you need? So I think that goes hand in hand with curiosity, having that kind of intellectual curiosity to want to know how things work and how different variables may be linked together, and then asking the right questions of your data set to try and get those answers. I think that's really important to data literacy. And then, it kind of helps to just be a data geek, right? to have that just real fundamental belief that data, a decision made with sound data, with data behind that decision, is always going to be a good decision, and have that fundamental tenet and belief in your psyche. And then there's some more like practical skills, right? There's so many really great data manipulation tools out there. If you're just entering data literacy, there's Excel, there's Access, there's Power BI, all Microsoft tools. And there's so many YouTube videos, there's so many resources out there that you can teach yourself those tools in a couple of hours of investment of your time. You can become, data literate in those tools and be able to manipulate the data sources that you have out there.
Yeah.
So, I would start with this kind of just basic curiosity for how are different variables linked together? How can you impact one thing by playing with something else? And then how do you kind of get this data set and analyze it and interpret it in really interesting ways?
Yeah, that's a great answer. You know, I think the only other thing that I may add to that, across my experience that I've seen, is also the ability to persuade. Because what I've found too is that different organizations are at different points in their maturity model, right? And I also believe that different executives and different functional areas are at different points in maturity. And I've found that speaking to different executives, sometimes some executives see tremendous value in data, and sometimes other executives not so much. So in as much as you could paint the story, sometimes you still need to sell the story. You know, I remember clearly I was talking to one executive good couple years back, and they were talking about some challenges they were having with their organization with employee leave. Fast forward the story, we built out a small little solution. It took like a month or something to build. And we were able to monetize that the organization was losing about $1 million in leave that may not have been valid leave because employees were breaking the policy, you know. So, but to get them to that point, I had to sell that executive because they're like, I'm not going to pay you for a month worth of your time, Wellington, to build this when I don't think this is a real issue, you know. So I've just found that persuasion and negotiation goes away too.
Yeah, that problem sounds familiar, Wellington. Very familiar, but I think it goes to organizational culture. If your organization has really committed and made that commitment to data literacy, then the need to persuade should not be so great anymore. That everyone should understand that when you make a business decision with data backed behind it, that's going to be a good decision.
Yeah, and that company I was dealing with, that was a very interesting one because their dynamic was not like our Bahamian context. It was an American company, so I just thought I'd share that. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think related to that, and Neisha really said came closer, but I think one of the things also is that you must have a willing recipient. Sometimes the individuals who wanted the data, if the data is supporting what their seat of the pants decision lies. But when the data collide, then they wonder whether or not the data is telling them the true story. But when the data now supports, therefore we should go with this. And so you can have it both ways. So part of that culture is also being able to take this when it's consistent with your seat of pants says and also accept it when it's not. So that maturity level within the organization is very, very important for the successful integration of the culture that Neisha talks about.
Yes,
Just to piggyback on that as well, we have to be careful that when we're compiling the data set, we're not compiling it in such a way to validate our assumptions, but to really take the data as it is and really take what the data is saying to us, but not trying to manipulate it to validate what we like you said, seat of the pants, what we think and feel.
Absolutely. Let the data tell the story. Don't try and force fit the data into your story. That is so true.
Unless you're the tobacco industry.
Now, suppose I have some tobacco reps on this call, Dr. Davis.
How does the tobacco rep on this call influence my impression of them?
I only kidding, man. I only kidding. Liz, over to you.
Sure. So now that we have an appreciation for the skills that are required to become data literate, we have the pyramid, so we know at which point we fall as relates to the data. What is it that we do, or how exactly do we go about tackling this information without using it to push our agenda, as Dr. Davis alluded to, or ignoring it or downplaying it if it doesn't support the position that we want to promote or we want to understand? So in short, the question is, how do we tackle this information? And then ultimately, who's responsible for data mining anyway?
That's a good question.
Dr. Davis.
You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. So I would say that the closer the data mining, the closer the user is to the data mining, the better, assuming that the technical skills are there to support that. And if it isn't, I think there's some value in investing and improving the skill set closer to it. What you don't want is you don't want, you know, this is common notion that IT should do it. To me, IT is the mechanic. They keep the car running, but they don't tell me where to drive. They give me some guidance. They say, hey, avoid the potholes, but they don't tell me go down that particular street. So as close as you can get the data to this usage, where there's some interpretation of the data and you can put some real life situations around the data, to me, that becomes important. I see this as a university professor. Students will pick up a calculator and they'll do a calculation, and rather than they're doing, you know, maybe, I don't know, 10 times 10, and they should come up with 100. But really, they somehow made a mistake and put in 1 times 10. And they put in, the answer comes out as 10. The closer you are to that data set, the more you can realize that 10 is not a reasonable answer. Therefore, I need to go back and take a closer look. But if you're removed from that situation and you're just putting in numbers, 10 becomes a valid output. And not because the computer can give you a number or plot you a graph, means that it makes sense. So my short answer is the closer that user is to the endpoint, the better off that data happens and the analysis happens. That's the best situation for me.
Yeah, I really want to chime in on that, because just like number crunching isn't just a finance function, data literacy isn't just an IT function. Absolutely, everyone needs to know the data sets that are available in their systems. To maybe you use an IT professional to do the SQL scripts and stuff for you, but you have to know the data and you have to know what is a reasonable answer or not, because, you know, garbage in, garbage out with any computer system.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Wow.
I just wanted to add to that. In a lot of instances, I'm finding with different companies, they're excited to implement different tools. For example, I know Neisha spoke to the Excel, or making sure that everyone is able to use tools from as simple to advanced. But it's IT that makes this tool available and gives everyone the access to it, and then that's it. And so you'll have users in some instances who have no clue on how much these tools can benefit them or how much this information can support their decision making. And so there lies the opportunity. And then to bring it back to Dr. Davis's point now, the closer the data miner is to the data, the better the organization is, because they're able to interpret it and read it and make it reasonable for your audience.
Yeah.
Liz, just to jump in on what you're saying there, that's why it's important that, you know, as business unit managers, we have to be involved in that process with IT in selecting the systems for our units. You know, it can't just be IT has given us a system. We have to be involved in that process so that we become owners of that system, okay? Because anything HR related, I need to have been involved in that decision-making process, because IT has provided it and they're going to provide the resources for maintenance. But as it relates to the day-to-day operation of that system and what it does and what it can do for my organization, I have to know what it does. So I should be involved in that initial decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more with Rhonda, you know, and Rhonda, that's a great lead in, because I actually have a follow-up question for you. You know, I hear Dr. Davis, I hear Neisha, I hear yourself talking about different functional verticals, right? You know, we're talking about HR, we're talking about IT, you know, we spoke a little bit about accounts a couple minutes back, you know, and one of the things I struggle with is certain organizations don't understand that data analytics, metrics, and the whole data governance structure needs to take a strategic perspective. It has to really start from the top and be cascaded down for long-term effectiveness, you know. So when we talk about data literacy, the whole organization needs to really embrace data and metrics. As an executive, what would you recommend to encourage data sharing and cooperation across different functional verticals, HR, customer ops, research, whatever it may be in an organization?
When you look at making data a part of your organization, it really needs to be embedded in that organizational culture. So what it means is that as an organization now, we have to start using the data in all aspects of our business to be able to make the decisions. So when we're looking at introducing organizational metrics, which we use to help us to make those decisions, we need to be cognizant that these metrics are shared across different units. There needs to be a shared responsibility for the metrics. And we also need to ensure that one unit's metric is not going to negatively impact another unit's metric, okay? So it has to be embedded into that culture. And when I talked about shared metrics, I'll just give you an example of a metric that we have in our organization. We have a service metric. That metric is shared by marketing, it's shared by operations, and it's shared by learning and development. Okay, so when we talk about service from a marketing perspective, they are responsible for driving customer engagement, increasing customer traffic, through their marketing and advertising campaigns that they develop for the organization. When we look at operations, they're the ones that's actually touching the customer. So they're interacting with the customers on a daily basis. And then you probably wonder, well, why did you tie it into learning and development? Well, it's tied to learning and development because you're training on customer service. So in order for all aspects of the business to come together and to collaborate, there has to be some shared ownership and shared responsibility. So I would say for businesses, we need to make sure that the metrics and every department is pretty much speaking the same language. And everybody at the end of the day is being held accountable for the very same outcomes.
Rhonda, if you see me smiling, I think back, oh my gosh, so very clearly to an example of when I was director of HR over at one of the local hotel chains. And one of the, and I'll maintain the confidentiality of this example, but one of the challenges that always made me smile is you would hear things like, we need to find the best talent we can to service our brand, right? So you get that imperative from HR. And then when you source a candidate that's $95,000 a year, when that contract goes forward for approval, various executive management or compensation board individuals will come back and say, hey, Brent, the salary too high. But wait, hold on. In January, in our strategic planning session, you said we need 5 out of 5 type talent. Yeah, that's still the case. Well, 5 out of 5 type talent comes at a cost. And we're not saying the same thing. So when I hear you talk about making sure that we're synchronized and making sure that metrics support each other, in that instance, the comp board and finance had a metric of let's reduce costs, but HR had a metric of let's bring in top tier talent, and the two don't align. So these are very real things that we go through as in organizations. These are very real. I don't know if any of the other speakers would like to add to that. If not, then Liz, I'll hand it over to you. Liz, you're on mute.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem.
From your functional area, what are some of the common KPIs that are used to measure success? So I know that Rhonda alluded to service as an area that different functions within her organization would focus on. Neisha, how about within your organization? What are some of the key performance indicators that your team uses?
Gosh, there's so many. So let me try to break them down into a few. There's the operational side of finance. Do you pay your customers' bills on time? Do your customers pay your bills on time? How much cash in bank? So this kind of operational metric, we tend to focus on productivity measures as well as service level agreement measures. Productivity means, can you measure the output of your teams and the people within your team in an objective way? And then service level agreements is, are you doing that timely, and are you doing it timely for your customers, and are your vendors paying you timely in return? So these tend to be focused in that type of area. Now, the other side of what I do in finance, and I spoke about it when I spoke about the data pyramid, which is prediction, which is forecasting. forecasting either the company's expected performance, company's cash balances. And there we tend to measure ourselves just simply on the accuracy of that. How were the forecasts that we generated compared to the actual results of the company in any given period? And when there are big enough variances or variances outside of the acceptable range for us, then we ask ourselves why, what went wrong? What was the variable that we didn't capture correctly? And what new data sets do we need to kind of solve that blind spot for us? So we tend to really just focus on those types, but there's softer KPI measurements as well. So across all of our company, we really care about employee engagement. And that's something before you never thought you could measure with statistics, but you can, and you can measure it really well with statistics. How engaged are your employees? How willing are they to release this kind of discretionary effort towards a task that they do or an objective they're trying to achieve? And we measure that and we hold ourselves accountable to that and take actions based on that data to try and improve that metric. And of course, let's not forget the real reason why we're in business, to serve our customers. How satisfied are our customers with us? How satisfied are our customers with the interactions they do with us on a daily basis, or how satisfied are they overall with our brand and our products and our concepts? So those are also really important KPIs for us.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have a CFO that's able to speak to commonly known HR metrics with your employee engagement or your marketing goals or the operations goals. And it simply is an example of how everyone needs to be aligned on what the company's overall goals are going to be and ensure that they don't clash with each other, as I believe Rhonda alluded to, but instead they support each other.
Absolutely. There are no silos. We are all accountable for the company's performance, and we should all be literate in the ways that we measure.
Good. Would you say that those goals...
Just to piggyback on that as well, you know, what we've done in our organization is we've identified those metrics that we feel is important for us as an organization to be successful. And every unit has a metric that is tied to that. So there again, it helps to drive that ownership for the ultimate business outcome.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment because when we speak about different types of metrics, I just want to highlight something for our listening audience. I'm sure our experts know this already, so this is more for the audience. But when we think about analytics and metrics, and I can't take credit for this. Josh Berzin, I believe he's one of the executives over at, anyway, I don't want to misquote his information, but Google him. He's a data analytics expert, one of the more reputed ones out there, Josh Berzin, and this is a model that he created, so all credit is due to him. But when we think about analytics, there are generally three categories. You have analytics or metrics that look at historical activity, what was done in the past. You have metrics and that's called descriptive analytics. You then have this category, I believe it's called predictive. I always mix up these two levels. It's descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, I believe, but do your research and you can confirm. The second level says that this is how we anticipate the forecast will look. So this is what we anticipate will happen. This is why, these are the assumptions, these are the mitigating factors, et cetera, et cetera. And then the third level of analytics is, this is what we anticipate will happen and how can we influence it? You know, individuals who trade and do things like the stock market, that is the type of what they call prescriptive analytics, because you look into the future, you look at what you think will happen, and then you make decisions off of that. And you try to see how you could either enhance or maximize those opportunities or mitigate those potential threats. So when we think about analytics, I want you to think about it in those lenses. What happened, what we anticipate happening, and for what we anticipate happening, how can we influence it to create greater value for our organizations or for our personal lives? All right. So I have a question for Dr. Davis. You know, one of the things that I've seen in the short time that I've been doing personal consulting and also being in HR, you know, there are some clear challenges with data literacy, even on the national level. I don't believe that there is a full appreciation for the value that data can provide. I feel that there are pockets of professions that value it more, and there are certain companies that value it more than others. So, what do you think are some of the common challenges that prevent data literacy from being fully appreciated in our community, just in the Bahamas? And before you answer that, I just want to say to our listening viewership, please remember to drop your questions in the chat. We do have a Q&A session just for you between 2:15 and 2:45. All right, Dr. Davis, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Wellington. I think one of the things for us in the Bahamas is past success. We've generally done well, and without the data, I should add. Now, all of a sudden, you're saying, I should be looking at the data, but really, I've gotten this far. You just reached, and you're telling me I need to be looking at the data? And don't let me have a higher rank than you. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
saying that, yeah. I think that the challenge also is how well do we as companies in the Bahamas engage a strategic plan? I didn't say write a strategic plan. I didn't say approve a strategic plan. I said engage a strategic plan. So that it becomes a document that guides the activities, because that's where some of your higher level KPIs come from, and they get filtered out into the rest of the organization. So one of the things you have to say is, all right, are we aligned to the strategic plan across the various entities?
Yes.
And if we're not aligned, because there hasn't been any driving force to make that happen, then we're gonna have some challenges embracing the data literacy. And I connect that back to competition. And depending on the level of competition within that sector, there may be not a sufficient enough driving force to do some of these things. Now, I made the comment about the tobacco industry earlier, and I thought that was safe just because, Reynolds up in North Carolina, but obviously that wasn't safe. So I can take an even less safe approach as an example. Banks. I've been in banks where I see what I'm talking about today in the sense that, and Wellington, I know you got the connections to the bank, but let's take this for a conversation.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
I have heard the responses come back to me where an individual, an employee of the bank has said to me, the same charges you will see down at Bank X. I say to myself, okay, that says to me the level of competition is not really where it is to drive us. So if the competition isn't there and I could just take the extra 50 cents from the customer, there's no desire, there's no great need for me to expend that extra energy, which is what it would seem like, to go there and engage this data to make myself better, stronger, faster, etc. So our history and our successful history impedes some of our future engagement in the data literacy. That's my 2 cents on that.
I can't disagree. I think that if we think about it nationally, we see it, even in terms of how over the years we've not been consistent even in diversifying our economy, because we've done certain things that have worked, and I think now we're to a place where we have to diversify, just using that economic example as one example. And I think organizations are slowly adopting the need for data literacy, but I still, like you said, maybe it's past success, maybe it's fair, maybe it's lack of skill set. I remember working with a particular client, won't say name or industry, but said client, we implemented a solution and they were gung-ho about it. We talked about a sustainability plan for them to bring on resources and have resident resources to manage the data sets. They did none of that. And then the whole data initiative fizzled, So sometimes it's sustainability is lack of resources. And I think too, for me, it's also sometimes expecting to get results too soon. Yes. Sometimes organizations, supervisory, senior and executive level leaders, all included, would look at a cost and they'll say, okay, these are my upfront costs. Yes, it's going to cost me $150,000, and I expect to see this returned in a payback period of a year. Is it likely? I mean, is it possible? Maybe. Is it probable? Probably not. So I think there has to be a greater appreciation for the data journey and understanding when those benefits will be realized, and we think about that whole net present value concept, I guess. So for me, it's a few things. I mean, those are some of the challenges, but I don't disagree. I think being comfortable, not being forced to do things differently and resting on our past success is a big one. Yeah. I don't know if Neisha or Rhonda, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Davis, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, I think one of the good things, quote unquote, about the COVID experience is that it forced us to not take some things for granted that we were quite comfortable with. This has knocked us out of our comfort zone for all the other bad things that it's done.
Yeah.
It's knocked us out of a comfort zone on a national level, and I think individually as well.
Yes, yeah, it's forced some change, absolutely.
Yeah. It's accelerated change, that's what I would say it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it has.
So just to add another color to the same point about being thrust into this required era, this is why change management at this time is so critical, because we have individuals who've been comfortable doing things the way that they've been doing it for such a long time, and it's worked. And so as Dr. Davis says, now it's not working anymore, and we're not seeing exactly why it's not working. We have to have an appreciation for the risk involved. And again, paying attention to the risk involved with people not being comfortable with the change, being open to changing, having the fear, as Wellington alluded to, but really being strategic on how we're going to prepare our teams to accept, to learn, to grow, and to sharpen their respective skills.
Yeah, and Liz, I just want to add to that too, Liz. What's so incredibly important to me, I was having a conversation with someone, and this individual is a training and educational professional. And they were saying, they've been in the industry for 30 something years. They've already gotten used to teaching a certain way.
Yeah.
And they were saying, Hepburn, I really don't want to pivot to this online teaching thing. I just don't feel as though it's necessary. What's your opinion? And I said, listen, we've been friends for a while, and what I'm going to say to you might offend you, but listen, if you don't pivot, you are going to become irrelevant next week. But as I listened to that person, there was a strong emotional and psychological tie to remaining the same.
Yes.
Even though the environment, the macro environment is saying, look, you need to change. If you don't change, you are going to become irrelevant. So when you talk about change management, a big part of that is helping individuals psychologically and emotionally to navigate through those changes. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
I think at the end of the day too, Wellington, it's, people have to see where the benefit in this is for them, so I think it's making them understand that at the end of the day, it's going to help them to be able to be more efficient and perform better. And we just need to understand it's really what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And once people see what's in it for them, I think you get that buy-in that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just to add, once they appreciate the WIFM, as you described, to provide the support that's needed. Because it's one thing to push team members or push employees along, but then we don't want to leave them hanging. We still need to provide whatever resources so that they feel encouraged. They don't feel that they're going to get goosey, as my auntie used to say, but they feel that they're with you or you're with them to make it happen or to go on to the next step.
Agree.
So there's some professionals who are on the call today who they're going through this information that we're talking through. They're trying to digest it all, but they may not be sure what the next step should look like for them. They have the will, but they're not sure what that skill should look like to improve their data literacy. What 2 or 3 tips would you give to them as they begin their personal journey on building data literacy? And I'll pass it over to you, Rhonda.
My advice would be, identify the data that you already have available to you and determine a business problem that you can solve using that data. In my organization in HR, we started looking at turnover. We already had the turnover data. We knew who was leaving. We knew how many people we had coming in. And what we started to then do was to dissect that data. So we wanted to understand exactly where our turnover was occurring. We in the retail industry, we were looking, and we're still looking at about 50% turnover on an annual basis. And so we needed to really dissect that and understand, where is this coming from? So we started to dissect, looking at age. We started looking at tenure. We started looking even at the reasons that people were giving us for leaving. So I would say, take the data that you already have available to you and use that as a starting point on your data journey. The next thing I would say is that, if you're not sure that you have data, pick a business problem and see how you can solve that with data. Most of us, in organizations, we have an annual employee survey. Let's start taking that data that we're gaining from that survey and really looking to see, what is that telling us for potential problems down the road, so that we can start to put programs and systems in place to mitigate that. The other thing I would say too is that, and speaking to my HR colleagues, what I would say, from an HR standpoint, is looking at the systems that we use in HR. A lot of the systems that we use already have that analytics built into it. And so we have to be comfortable using the tools that we already have. And if your tool doesn't have it, I would say, make that investment in a tool that has it, to make it easier for you to start the journey.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, we'll end this structured interview segment with this final question, and I'll pose this question initially to Dr. Davis, but any of our speakers can chime in. So Rhonda gave us some really, really good tips in terms of practical steps you can take leaving this call, things that you can implement tonight or tomorrow, because tomorrow is the first work day, after you would have gotten this information. But I do want to throw to the group, are there any good resources that you came across? I don't know, any books, workshops, software, little tips, little job aids that you would recommend for someone who would want to add to the tips that Rhonda would have shared? Dr. Davis, you could get us started.
I think for me, this one is pretty straightforward, in the sense that if you're starting out in an area, any book that has introduction in the title will do. Because whatever you get in there is, you haven't had it before. And once you've gone through that first book, once you've gone through those few first videos on YouTube, then you're now able and qualified to ask yourself, you now know the next question is. So in choosing the second point of a resource, you're now capable to do that. But if you're starting out at ground zero, anything that says introductory or introduction to, whether it be a video, whatever is your preferred mode of learning. If it's a book, if it's a video, doesn't matter. Just go there and get it. And the good thing about YouTube is, you could pick up a video and after the first 2 minutes, whether or not that person connecting with you. Get out. And it doesn't matter. Google already know that you only look at it for 2 minutes, and they won't recommend that anyhow. Go to the next, and when you watch that one for 5 minutes, Google grabs that, because analytics is at work every time you click something on YouTube. So they grab that submission, their next recommendation will be in line with the one that you've watched for the extended period.
Yes.
You're scrolling for books, don't worry about the bestseller. Just get anything to start off with, no matter whether the topic is Power BI or if it's Excel or whatever. And then once you've got that Excel to a point where you can make a couple of formulas, then you're going to say to yourself, man, I really want to learn more about pivot tables. So you go and you find the book on pivot tables, and you read that. I remember I bought my book on pivot tables from Barnes & Noble down on University Drive. I had that read before the plane landed in Nassau.
Wow.
And I was good to go.
Mm-hmm.
Wellington, I can't read a novel to save my life. But you gave me that book on pivot tables, I couldn't put it down. Yeah. And in my opinion, I'm clicking all the buttons that's on the screen. When I get back to my computer, I don't need the book anymore because the book is now in my head. If that's how you operate, then that's what you do. I can go there and make a start at it, and don't be afraid to fail. Just go try it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah, I would definitely say, like Dr. Davis said, start with Excel, become a master of some of these skill sets he talked about, and then move on to Access. And then, you know, after you've kind of mastered some database management and database query skills, Power BI is a really great tool out there for visualization of data and how you can present that and persuade others to come around to your point of view. But I also did a lot of formal education in something called information engineering, and lots of parts to it. But I think the part that's really relevant to data literacy is how do you structure data in tables, in databases, in a way where you can link up that data. And when you start to link data from different sources together, you really unleash powerful information. So kind of get yourself accustomed with that concept, and that knowledge would be a really good place to start as well.
Indeed, indeed. Like Neisha too, I've done several different workshops across my professional experience, but for me, I'm definitely the touch and feel guy. I kid you not, as nerdy as this sounds, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. There would literally be hours where I would just play in Excel. You know, I would just have a data set, you know, do my pivots, set up my ODBC databases, all these different stuff, and just have fun doing it, you know, and just see where the data leads you, you know. For those of you that want some formal recommendations in terms of resources, I know these are not paid sponsor ads. These are just things that I've done that I can speak for. AIHR, the Analytics and HR Institute, has a pretty good lineup. If you Google AIHR, they have, and I think Rhonda did it, they have a HR Analytics Leader designation that's pretty good. They have a HR Data Analyst designation that's pretty good. There also is, for the HR folks on the line, there's also a micro course through HRCI that talks about analytics. That's pretty good. That's pretty affordable. And if you want some more deeper dive stuff, I literally have books that I could recommend. Some that I have in soft copy. So you could always reach out to me. But yeah, I think for me personally, it's just getting in there, trying it, utilizing it. Excel is not the, and this is my opinion, out of the 4 or 5 of us that are leading this session, but Excel is a phenomenal tool. But when you get into bigger data sets and you want to start doing some deeper mining, it may not be the best solution. So also understand what your needs are, and because your needs evolve over time. And as your needs evolve, you may need to have different solutions to satisfy your new needs. So let's just consider that. All right. So now,
Wellington,
oh,
sorry,
sure,
I just wanted to add, no, as you were talking about the resources that persons can use or access to increase their data literacy, LinkedIn Learning came to mind. And that's one of the tools that I use. And one of the reasons why I greatly appreciate it is because of how interactive it is. Yes. And so even though they share a heavy topic, you digest it in a way that's palatable and it's easy to receive because of their presentation style. So I just wanted to add another resource through LinkedIn Learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liz and I did a session last Sunday on what we call learning agility, being an agile learner. And I wholeheartedly agree. I like LinkedIn Learning because I don't have to read anything. Listen, I always tell individuals, if you give me the option of writing a 1-page essay or 1-page short paper and talking for a full day, I would take talking for a full day, hands down. I just don't enjoy the whole reading and writing thing. I do it, but it's not my forte. So LinkedIn Learning's nice. I did an executive leadership course through them. Took maybe 2 hours, but it was very interactive and I was able to absorb it and didn't have to read anything, not much anyway. So a great resource. We're now going to pivot and we're going to see a short sponsor video from our title corporate sponsor, which is Druba Solutions. It's only a 2-minute video, but I want to highlight Druba because Druba Solutions, and can you guys see my screen? Just want to be sure.
Yes.
Okay, great. And let me make sure that audio is on. Yes. Druba Solutions is doing a really, really good job locally. And WHI, and I don't say this to sound proud, I'm sorry, I just say this to protect my brand. My company only associates with the best in the industry. And Druba Solution is doing a very good job in the space of personal finances, managing your career, college planning, entrepreneurial ventures, and also social entrepreneurship. But I want to highlight a short video that they have about corporate wellness. You know, I am one of the senior leaders for the HR Association in town, and I can say that I have seen a lot of different corporate wellness solutions, but they have one of the better ones. And if you're interested in this type of product, it might be something that you might want to consider. So I'll just play this briefly, and then after this, we'll have our 30-minute Q&A session for the questions that you would have submitted. Enjoy.
What do you believe is the greatest source of stress for employees in your organization? You may be surprised to learn that 71% of employees cite finances as their top source of workplace stress. Druba Solutions is passionate about filling your company with happy and productive staff by taking financial stress out of the workplace. Self-paced online coursework, staff lunch, and learn program and quarterly workshops. We educate your staff on the essentials of healthy money management. Well, most programs stop at education. We guide employees to the root of the problem by helping them focus on their behaviors. This empowers them to make strong financial decisions moving forward. Personal finance is personal, so we give all staff access to one-on-one coaching with a trained financial coach. From new hire to CEO, each employee receives confidential guidance on their specific situation. Financial wellness programs show employees you care about them, while also helping your bottom line. Focusing on the issue that affects over 70% of workers fosters a strong company culture, increases pay satisfaction, and decreases turnover. Companies have reported an ROI of 3-to-1 after adding these programs. To learn more about how we can help, email us at info@drubersolutions.com or call us at 242-427-8025.
Okay. All right. So let me stop sharing. And now we will pivot and get some questions from you on the floor. So Liz, over to you.
Yes. So we have a comment on the pyramid analogy, and I'll ask Neisha if you could repeat your explanation of the pyramid analogy, please.
Sure. I also encourage you to Google it because there's a lot of websites out there about the data pyramid, but this is the one I use and I modified some of them along the way. So at the bottom of the pyramid is data. We have access to tons of data across our organizations, across social media platforms. Data is abundant and plentiful. But you have to ask yourself, how do you take that data and you move it up the next level, which is information? What is the information you need from that data to help you with the challenge that you're facing? And with that information, you're going to go up again to knowledge, which is a deep understanding of the matter, of the problem, of the situation that you're trying to analyze. And then up even higher to insight, which is, you know, a impactful, insightful view of the challenge that you're facing. And that takes you to the ultimate aim, I think, for me, of data analysis, which is prediction and influencing outcomes, to Wellington's point. How do you use this information, insight, knowledge to predict what is going to happen and influence it to the way that you want it to be? So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Neisha. Next, we have a question from Franklin. How are organizations managing the culture to constantly challenge successes and failures? It was noted the topic on curiosity and the need to leverage data in organizations.
Is that directed to anyone in particular, Liz, or just generally?
No, it was a general question to the group.
Okay.
I can start off and then please chime in other participants. For me, you have to recognize that there are different stages of learning, right? For me, there's always a stage where your teams are trying to gain mastery and trying to become really proficient in something. And if they're in that stage of learning, you have to have a high tolerance for errors and for mistakes. You have to be willing to accept that as part of your journey in the mastery process. And you have to inoculate a culture where it's acceptable to make mistakes. It's acceptable to say, my bad, I got this wrong, let me try again and do it better the next time. And that environment and that culture is really important. Now, there's some business operations and business decisions where it's so important that you can't tolerate that high level of mistake. And that's when you really have people who've moved into this mastery phase where they're operating at optimum performance and real deep knowledge and insight in what they're doing. And there you lower your tolerance for errors and ask for higher accuracy in what they do. But it really depends on where they are in that journey. It's my view.
It's a good answer, Neisha.
Can I add to that?
Please do.
I think also we'd want to consider, what does that performance evaluation look like? And will that error come back to haunt me? And if that's my fear, I'm not taking that risk. So I think we also need to look at, as we make room for these errors, we have to have a systemized approach to not have that penalize the individual. Otherwise, why would they take the risk? So if you're in a risk-averse environment, that's not going to allow people to go out there and do, we're not saying be reckless, but we're saying go out there and explore some possibility. And if it's just happening in a spreadsheet or in a graph, then that's relatively harmless, because at some point, the interrogation of that allows you to take that past point A to point B to point C, and hopefully you've caught whatever the error is or the assumptions are, and you've challenged those assumptions such that the fear has been mitigated, or the risk has been mitigated around that particular approach that you're thinking about taking. So that would be something I would add to that, but I totally agree with what Neisha said as well.
Rhonda, would you like to add to that point?
No, I agree with what Neisha is saying. It's creating that culture where people feel safe, and understanding the levels that your employees are at, and not putting that pressure on people that have not reached that mastery stage, but really giving them probably a small project to start out, just to gain that confidence in their ability to use data, to manipulate data, to understand data. It's just starting small sometimes. I think as organizations, we try to do too much one time. We want to do it all. And like Wellington said, you're looking for instant results. And I think sometimes we need to be patient in realizing that this is a journey, and it's going to take us time to really actualize a lot of our assumptions and see the results we're looking for.
Yes. Thank you for those responses. Following that, also coming from Franklin, it's noted, how do we strike the balance within your culture and teaching your teams the importance of constantly reviewing actions and plans to measure opportunities without breaking the spirit of the team members? So without driving them so hard with a militant approach, but rather allowing the flexibility or finding the balance in the culture so that they can accomplish and set out and do what they need to do.
I would say, performance feedback needs to be a regular part of your culture. We can't wait until the year-end performance review to be able to have that dialogue with employees. So constant feedback. There should be set times where you're sitting with your direct reports as a manager and having that feedback in order for them to understand what the expectations are and where they are at in meeting those expectations. So constant feedback, I think, is to create that environment that employees feel safe.
Mm-hmm. I want to add to that too. I think for me too, it's modeling it. I, as a senior level leader, one of the gaps that I see is that sometimes we say, do as I say and don't do as I do. And I feel that if we want to create that mindset of, like with the Japanese speak about that Kaizen approach, right? That continuous improvement, that it is just, and it's not to be a burden to say that good is never enough, but it's just realizing that once we achieve good, that great could be within our reach if we continue to push the limits. Is one, model it in the way that you think, model it in the way that you interact with your team, and challenge them, but challenge them in a way where they see that it is value that can come out of it. The second thing is have transparent conversations. I remember working with a particular team member at a particular organization, and I gave them something to get done. And the individual was in my office, and I could see that they just weren't comfortable with the directive. And they were walking out, and I said, I could see that you're not comfortable. Let's talk about it. And she said, it's not that I'm not comfortable. I just don't think you made the right call. And I said, wow, listen, I appreciate that. Don't leave. Let's talk about it. I don't need for you to agree with me, but I don't want you to leave doing something that you feel is the wrong call. Let's talk about why you think it's the wrong call. Now, what I need for you to understand is that I still have to make the final call on this, but I appreciate your feedback, because it may be something that that I may not have observed, or it may be something that I know that you don't know that may make you think I'm making the wrong call, but it might still be the right call. But having those transparent conversations allows you to have positive dialogue, sometimes disagree, break the situation so that you can really put it back together and have the right solution, not just a solution. So those are things that I try to live out every day. Model it. That continuous improvement and innovation should be a way of life, and encourage transparent conversations. I've had team members come to me and close the door and say, Hepburn, you wrong. Like, you wrong. I hear what you're saying, but you're wrong because of this. And I welcome it. And it may be difficult conversations, but when we think about constant improvement and innovation and divergent thinking, it goes a long way.
And then when I think back, everything you guys said was excellent and I agree with, but when I also think back to the learnings we've had around employee engagement and what really leads to a happy, engaged colleague in your organization, there are a lot of things, but one of them is to feel that you're in an open, transparent environment where it's okay to make a mistake. You will be called out if you make it, but you will learn from it.
Yeah.
And that your opinions and your views matter and are listened to. I think that's really important to be in an environment that creates that culture. And then also just don't forget to have fun. Sometimes it's good to just have some fun while you're trying to solve these really big, hefty business problems.
Yes, thank you, ladies and gents. We have a question from Kimberly that's piggybacking off of the previous question regarding breaking the spirit of team members. How can we break that fear, increase the comfort level, and to help the team recognize that data literacy is needed for any organization to continue to evolve?
I'll try to give my opinion, my 2 cents on this one. I think training. You can't underestimate training. You can't send someone out to do a task that they're not equipped to do. And they end up failing, and then you want to penalize them for failing. Like, I mean, you rigged the game against them, for crying out loud. So I think as we engage these data cultural changes, there's some change management that we have to equip everybody to handle this. This is not automatic just because we feel like we understand it well. So I think that's part of it as well.
I see Simone Bo echoed your statements, Dr. Davis. She says that she loves the response that Neisha gave. So often people are shamed and not given enough training or support in change initiatives. We must create cultures for learning and embracing change. Look at that alignment.
And I want to add to that. And this is a very transparent statement. I didn't have this in my script at all, but one of the things that I am learning even up to this day, that there's a difference between empowerment and leaving someone out in the cold. And sometimes as leaders, we mix up the fact that even though a team member might want to be empowered through delegation, they may still want you to occasionally check up on them and make sure that they are okay. You know, I had a team member say to me on a particular project, they said, you know, Hepburn, I like the fact that you let me own this, but you could have come and at least checked up on me a little bit more, because there were points where I was struggling and I didn't feel as comfortable coming back to you because you gave this to me. And I said, wow. So that's a point of learning for you, Hepburn. So, you know, just bear that in mind too. I think that's an important observation. Empowerment and delegation doesn't mean that you still can't provide periodic and continued support to team members.
Thank you. We have a question from Tanisha Fowler. She works for a large church congregation and would like to understand, how is data important for her organization in the future from your perspectives?
I saw that question. That was a great question. I would turn it around to her and say, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve in your organization? Or what is the problem you're trying to solve? Is it church attendance numbers? Is it an objective to reach a certain funding goal? Because that really is the start of when you're talking about data literacy, as Rhonda said. Choose a business problem and then figure out what data you have to try and solve that problem for you. But if it was something like engagement, I mean, we talk about employee engagement, there must be engagement questions and surveys and data points you can use in a church organization that gives you useful feedback about how to amend the services that you offer to improve engagement.
And if I could add to that too, Neisha talked about the main services. I know that a lot of churches and congregations also develop strong relationships in terms of their parishioners and small groups. So focus on not just the main church service, but what about the small groups that you've identified for your church? You know, your Bible studies, your midweek service, your whatever it may be, you know, those ancillary touch points where, as you said, Tarn, that if you are a part of a big church, you know, one of the challenges with being in a big church, I would imagine, is that sometimes individuals could feel disconnected, you know, because if you come to a Sunday service, well, in this COVID environment, let's say it was pre-COVID, and you came to a Sunday service where you have 500 individuals in service, you may feel like one in a number, you know? So focus on your main service, but also focus on those ancillary opportunities that the church would create for connection. And I think that's important too, especially since we're in a virtual environment. People don't engage the same way that they do in person that they do virtually. You know, so now that we've pivoted and a lot of things are online, we now need to think about, what does virtual engagement mean? How do we measure that? How do we assess that? Now that we're virtual, we also have the possibility of spanning beyond geographic boundaries. One of the things that I realized as a part of my first series, which I didn't anticipate, is I had individuals joining from the US, Malaysia, Spain, Africa, England. So now here I am with my Bahamian-centric content, but 30% of my audience are non-Bahamians. I have to adapt. You know, I have to use that data. I have to do something with that. So 2 points, I would encourage you to think about the small groups and also think about that virtual engagement side of it, now that a lot of churches have had to pivot and go online.
Are there any other questions that we have from our audience today? Feel free to just turn on your mics, unmute your mic and send it out to us, or you can type it in the chat. Wellington, I hear no one. I see no additional questions. I yield to you.
All right, there you go. Yield is such a big word, boy. You could tell we on a data literacy workshop. So I have two contingency questions that if we ran out of questions in our Q&A that we could table. And and I want to table them now. And this is an open floor now. Anyone can chime in. Any one of the panelists can chime in. What are some of the common mistakes? You know, we've talked about it, but we've not directly put this question to you. What are some of the common mistakes you've observed with organizations trying to implement analytics programs? You know, what are some of those typical don'ts that you see some organizations do that you would like to caution our group on?
Yes. So I've seen the big, expensive, IT-driven sort of data repository building projects, which on paper have amazing ROIs, usually based on productivity increases from everyone having instant access to this data. And then it's launched and no one knows how to use it, or no one has developed their data literacy skills to take this data and turn it into information and knowledge and insight, or no one has an appreciation for the data that's being accumulated and stored in a variety of systems across the business. So yeah, that's definitely a pitfall number one. I always believe in growing data literacy organically and starting with one business problem at a time and building up your literacy through the solving of those problems.
That's interesting, Neisha. Can you extrapolate a little bit on that business problem? Because I've seen organizations sometimes, one executive level leader who I knew of used to say this phrase that you shouldn't try to boil the ocean, right? You know, I've seen some individuals try to solve poverty through their analytics programs. You know, the business problem is just too big. So what advice, and any of our other panelists can chime in, what advice would you give to help refine your business problem, to make it value adding, but also to not make it too big so that you don't really get any value from it?
Yeah, I just want to point out that because I say grow it organically doesn't mean you can't accelerate it and grow it fast. But organically is different from trying to bring an outside-in approach to data literacy.
Agreed.
So how do you refine the data problem? I mean, one of the basic principles I use is if you're building an assumption on an assumption, then you have too many assumptions and you're going to get the wrong answer. So always try to make sure that you're starting with what the base level data is and that it's based in fact. And you're really clear on the assumptions you're putting into your model and you test them for sensitivity. Some assumptions are more important than others, and it's important, you know, which are the really important ones, so you can make sure you spend the time to get those as accurate as possible. It's certainly been my approach, but I know Dr. Davis must have a lot of insight on this question as well.
I see him smiling, so I know he does.
I need to stop smiling. I can tell you, you may not like my answer, but my answer is do not implement an analytical program.
Why?
An analytics program. Back to what Neisha is saying. What you implementing the program for? You're putting the focus on the wrong thing. The focus should be on that business problem you're trying to resolve. It just so happens that the analytics is going to help you get to answer the question. But when the focus is so much on that analytics plan, you get in this new piece of software, etc., you get caught up in the plan. And you miss what the purpose that plan is supposed to serve, which is help you be more efficient in this direction here or give you a better return, whatever it happens to be. That plan is only a tool to get you to a particular end. Focus on the end you're trying to get to. Start off with what is the goal you're trying to reach? What's the KPI you're trying to achieve? That's where you're going to. So don't implement an analytics plan.
I see my 24-year-old Rhonda in the corner shaking her head. So you know Rhonda, something to say.
That's cool too. Rhonda, you shaking your head, I'm smiling. So the two of us have to watch out.
I'm agreeing with Dr. Davis, you know, because I think we try to throw everything at the wall and hope that something sticks and something works. And it's really just focusing on that one or two issues that we can actually solve, as opposed to, you know, we try to be too complex. And I think to start this journey or to be effective in this journey, we just have to be simple. We have to be, you know, they say simple, stupid. We just have to start very, very simple. And then to gain the buy-in and who knows where it goes from there, but we fail because we try to do too much at once.
Agree.
Speaking of fancy tools or shiny new tools or that big project that organizations of IT may push ahead, in the US and other countries, the rise of artificial intelligence is becoming more and more popular. Do you think artificial intelligence is a tool that can be used or is being used locally? I'll pose that to Rhonda.
You're posing that to me. I'm really thinking that's a question for Neisha,
How about all three of you?
I would say that I think artificial intelligence, when you think of artificial intelligence, people all automatically think robots, right? But we have to recognize that it's really an enhancement to how we do business. It's an enhancement to the people side of our operation. And so if businesses want to drive greater efficiency, if we want to enhance our customer experiences and increase worker productivity, yes, I think AI is something that we can embrace, in Bahamian organizations. I was reading an article, Wellington, you had me doing a lot of reading for this. So I was reading an article.
Send the bill to Liz, please don't send
recognizing.
I know a company that has a lot of money, WHI.
Recognizing that Amazon, they're using AI in their large distribution centers, and that's what they're using to help to pick and package products in order to be able to deliver that next day service that they have promised to customers. So I think if we can adopt some of these trends that we see coming out of the US and Canada, it can enhance our business. There's a lot of AI technology out there too that, if you're in a vicinity of a business, you can get an alert, to your phone, letting you know what goods and services they have to offer. So I think it is a great opportunity for us here in the Bahamas to embrace it. And who knows where it can take us in our businesses.
I would say big AI is already here in a lot of our businesses. Someone referenced the banks in our chat, and that's certainly true. I know AI is present in the telecommunications business. And I will say, if we don't start learning it and mastering it, we're going to get left behind from the rest of the world, because it is the future to use AI to at least give first level responses to customers' queries, to do basic data analytics for you. It's definitely the trend of the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. Davis, AI?
I be consistent in my answers on this one. I think it's another tool, and I think we should be applying it where necessary. If we're planting a marigold in the garden, we don't need a backhoe. But if you're trying to dig a hole, let's get ourselves a tractor in there. Let's apply the tools. I try not to get distracted by the tool, and I try to see if I can focus on what that tool can do for me. So if my problem is to the point where AI is going to be productive, embrace it. If I'm just starting out, let's go to small things first and work out. Let's pick our problems for once we could. Someone said earlier we need some small wins. Go for the small wins. Also, I think this may not be a bad time to put in there that whole Pareto effect. When you look, you get a whole bunch of issues that are showing up, those root causes, and thinking about what is actually contributing. What's that 20% that you could address? Have that 80% impact on the issues that you have.
Yes.
Keep it simple, man. Go for what works and have your tools develop as your skills develop and your problems get more complicated. And the problem that works at, BTC may not work at the dentist's office, or the tool that works at BTC may not work at the dentist's office, or the church, or the University of the Bahamas. So I think it's all got to stay within perspective of your issue, your tools, and your skill set, and you get some success out of it, marrying those.
Yeah, it's a good answer. Very good answer, panel. Liz, I think we are at the hour, and I think we can summarize some central themes and have some final remarks from our panel.
Certainly. Certainly. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much to our panelists this evening. I did enjoy the conversation just as much as I knew that I would have at the beginning of our session. So thank you for keeping it informative, lighthearted, and still valuable. So it wasn't just a lot of talk, but there was some insights that were shared today that I take home as golden nuggets.
And Liz, Liz, I just feel happy that I remained as a host and didn't go into participant mode. That was a win enough for me.
I know how that is. So a few things I just wanted to bring back to the forefront. The pyramid. A visual always makes it easy to digest information. So having the concept of the pyramid in mind certainly helped with understanding how data and then information and then knowledge and then insights and then predictions can truly be a benefit and even a skill, a mastered skill within your organization. Using data should be interwoven and you should become fluent in it, almost like a second language. So for those of us who are just starting out with data literacy, more or less, think in the terms of data and how this data is going to help with you making your decisions. And then you know you're good when what happens? You start dreaming about the data, or you start dreaming about the solutions that come about as a result of the data. That definitely.
Someone say Neisha?
What have you dreamt last night, Neisha? There was also some tips shared on this complementary skills that we want to brush up on in order to begin our journey in data literacy. We want to not be afraid of technology. Appreciating that technology is our new landscape. There's nothing more or less that we can do without the use of technology. And so don't be afraid, put on your big girl underwear and jump in, or big guy underwear and jump in. We want to be mindful of our critical thinking skills. What good is the data if we're not able to analyze or to even have some clue on how to approach it? And then we want to be mindful of, as Stephen Covey says, he's one of my favorite authors, and he says, begin with the end in mind. So we want to begin with the problem. Once we have an idea on where the problem is, then we can work backwards and factor in which tools we may need, which type of data that we may need. Is AI even relevant to us, or is it the backhoe when we don't need all of that effort? Problem-solving skills is going to be important so that we can use the data appropriately to solve the challenges that we've presented or selected to work on.
Yes.
Just two more points I wanted to highlight. That when business unit managers, they need to be involved in selecting the tools. So we can't just allow IT to make the decision on behalf of the entire organization, because chances are the program is going to fall flat or it's not going to be used to the maximum opportunity that it offers. So we want to make sure that all of our team members have some sense of why this tool is important, how it's going to help us solve our skills, and provide the necessary support so that the tool can be used appropriately. And then another point that I noted is asking the question, are we all aligned? So are the different functions within the organization working toward the same goals? Or do you have sales going in one direction and marketing going in another direction, and they're not supporting one another? And so then the data becomes a challenge because it's not pushing us in the direction that we want to go in. And then lastly, when you leave the workshop today, there's some practical tips that were shared that you can implement right away. Firstly, you want to identify the data that you currently have available. Believe it or not, all of our organizations have some type of data available. Review that. Determine what is the business solution that you can support using this data. Next, you can pick a business problem and then determine how you can solve it using the data that's available. That's beginning with the end in mind. Or it's recommended that you simply don't even walk that far, don't run. The baby step is to simply be comfortable with the tools that you already touch. You may lightly dabble in Excel. You may lightly dabble or may have seen a picture of Power BI. Take your time to find the resources, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Google, whether it's LinkedIn Learning, whether it's whatever tool that you select, but find the tool that works best for you and start small. After the baby steps, then you progress. And you'll appreciate that it's a journey for individuals as well as organizations as we build the capability of data literacy. Wellington, I have so many more notes in my book, but I'm going to leave it there because those were the points that I highlighted as things that most persons would find very relevant, very relevant. So again, I'd like to thank our panelists for the conversation, for the valuable information, for the encouragement to all of us to continue on our data literacy journey.
Absolutely. Great job, Liz. So before Liz and I tell you a little bit about what our companies do, we just want to hear finally from our panelists to see if you have any final remarks. So I'll just go from left to right on my screen. Dr. Davis, you can go first, Neisha second, and Rhonda third. So Dr. Davis, you're up.
I'm going to say, if you're out there listening, you're saying to yourself, should I try this? The answer is yes. Just go do something. Nothing, no long story. Get something started. Go small, but go.
Yeah, absolutely. With every decision you're about to make in your business or your organization, think about, is there data that can support this decision-making process? And get started. There's no time to start like the present.
And Rhonda?
What I would say, speaking to my HR colleagues in the audience, don't be afraid of the data. Don't be afraid to use the tools that you have available to you, and use it to support your business cases for change. We have a seat at the table, and so we have to be able to speak the language of all of the others sitting at the table. So let's use the data that we have to make our business cases for change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, panelists. Very, very insightful discussion. And, even though we kept it lighthearted, this is a serious topic because data literacy is a core skill set. And for any professional, regardless of industry or level or country, if you want to shift your capability, you have to become someone who embraces data, period. So thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your experience and for the stories shared. So now I will hand it over to Liz to tell us a little bit about what her company does. And see, I was so excited. I even forgot that I was supposed to go before Liz because Liz is such a tough act to follow, man. Oh man. I was supposed
So ladies and gents, I'm happy to share with you my professional consultancy. It's under my name because that's what, as most people know me, and I think I'm able to connect with persons through my relationships, through our communications, and I do appreciate building professional consultancy opportunities through the connections of relationships. Mm-hmm. So what do? We offer guidance and consultancy through organizational change management. And in that area, we identify what the risks are. So just as you would have in an insurance company or a finance organization's approach to risk management, organizational change management follows a similar philosophy, identifying the risks, understanding where they come from, how they came about, and putting things in place to mitigate those risks. And when we're dealing with change management, we're dealing with people. And understanding that people generally are a little uncomfortable or fearful of change, that's the first risk out the gate. And so what we do is we work with leaders to help them understand what their goals are and what the change is going to look like, conduct assessments, individual impact analyses, and use different tools to help leaders understand how best they can prepare their teams to move from one way of working to a new way of working, whatever the change or the new way of working is going to be.
Apologies. Mm-hmm.
That's okay. And then our second area of focus is in talent development. So what we try to do is put plans in place, or help leaders put plans in place where they're able to build the organization's capabilities. Now, whether that capability is in data literacy, or if it's in responding to change quickly, or if it's in whatever area, customer service, any topic, you name it. Once you have a solid plan in place that supports the aligned goals of your organizations, you are likely to get a better product or output from your team members. What we do is recommend plans based on what you're trying to achieve. Now that plan can include training, it can include performance management, it can include a number of traditional HR functions. And what we want to do is equip you with the tools and the skills to make sure that you're successful in that area. And then lastly, our area focuses with leadership coaching. The tail follows the head sets the pace. No matter what's on paper, no matter what's going on in that environment, whatever direction that leader sets or builds as the priority and reinforces, it's what's going to be within that organization, whether it's spoken or not spoken. Because sometimes, you know, as leaders, we say one thing, but it doesn't follow through in the behaviors that we model. And so through leadership coaching, again, we talk through what are the goals that you want to achieve in being a leader or for your team to lead in which area, and how do you want them to go about achieving those goals. Ultimately, we influence business results by planning and being strategic with our people resources, because we have an appreciation for, as Neisha in this specific instance can appreciate, the numbers and the data have to make sense, and you want to forecast so that you can predict certain outcomes. We take a similar approach with our people resources so that we can gather the data, we can understand what has happened in the past and forecast where it is that we want to go, and ultimately predict the desired behaviors of our team members. So in a nutshell, I hope that wasn't too long, Wellington, but in a nutshell,
not at all.
These are the areas that we focus on because of my range of experiences working in hospitality, working in the government sector, working in the private sector, working in human resources, and a number of different areas. We've been able to amass a significant amount of experiences and learnings to support leaders. And so far, a number of my clients have been pleased. And so we're going to continue in this stead and continue being open to learning and growing and building ultimately more productive organizations. Thanks, Wellington.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. And, you know, I have to say this, and I only say what I mean. And I feel led to say this, and I said it on the previous session. WHI supports everything that Elizabeth Longley and her company is doing. I've known Liz for a very long time. And like I said, again, not from a place of pride, but from a place of brand protection, we only associate with the best. And Liz is making a wave and an impact in the HR, consulting, change management, talent development space. And WHI is proud to partner with us. So if you need any of the advisory services that she provides, know that you won't be disappointed. And for those of you that respect my opinion, know that she is someone you can definitely consult and get value from. All right. Now I will say she's a tough act to follow. My gosh, we gotta change this script, Liz. I can't follow that, man. I don't know what to say. So WHI is Wellington Hepburn International. We focus on a lot of similar things that Elizabeth and her company focus on. So the whole intent behind WHI, and can you guys see my business card?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Great. For some reason, the setup on my computer changed this time, so I can't see, now that I'm sharing my screen, I can't see your faces. So I just want to do a pulse check every now and then. But WHI, the whole concept behind it and slogan is as we grow together. It's about helping individuals to be better, to be their best self, to build capability for the long term. And we do that through keynote presentations. We do that through local and international speeches. We've just published our first book, which I will highlight very briefly. But know that you can check out our Facebook page, LinkedIn page. We're also on IG, Twitter, WhatsApp, and clearly email to see if there are any services that we can lend to you or your organization to help you go faster, further, longer, stronger. That's one of the phrases from one of my mentors. So know that WHI has a desire from an HR, talent management, project management, and consulting standpoint to help each of you to become better. And if we can work with you to do that, we would love to. All right. A couple other things I want to highlight in the last 2 minutes that we have is for each one of these sessions, we produce certificates. These are sample certificates from some of the episodes, previous episodes in the series. So if you're interested in getting a certificate, a digital certificate is $4.99. And right after this chat, I'll send out an email and you can just write back and let us know that you are interested. I also want to touch on the fact that we've also published our first book. I have to get used to saying that. Wow, it's major. We've published our first book.
Just want to celebrate that for a moment. That's a
Oh,
big deal. Congratulations. Yes.
But between Commonwealth Bank and WHI and a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, I think the bag's still under my eyes. But hey.
Well done, Wellington.
Thank you. I appreciate you. But navigating this season, we know that some individuals have navigated well and others have navigated not so well and others have not navigated at all. So we need to think about what is our propensity for change? How do we deal with change? How do you plan ahead for change even before it reaches your doorstep? So WHI has created a 5-step model. It's called the R5 model because it's 5 R's in the acronym that gives you a model to help you build your capability. If you're interested in a digital copy, it's available on Amazon. But by the end of the month, which is also the end of the year, we will have physical copies in town, and we'd love to sign and get you a copy. So please feel free to avail yourself if that is something that interests you. And last but not least, in the last few seconds we have, this is our next event. Oh my gosh, Liz, I feel like so many of these topics are so important.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So I'm with you.
They are so important. And this is yet again a very important topic. I have literally worked with leaders that have tremendous IQ, but do not know how to balance EQ. And because of that, their teams are disengaged and they have lackluster performance. On the inverse, I've worked with extremely charismatic leaders. I mean, they could talk money out of your wallet. You want $100? Sure, here you go. But from an IQ standpoint, they don't have the capability, the knowledge, the expertise to really drive high performance in their teams. So what we need to talk about is how do you become an emotionally intelligent leader, someone who can balance IQ along with EQ. And next Sunday, the same time, we'll be talking about how do you do that, because that is a competency and a skill. Now, I know that our expert is on the line, Simone Bowe. So Simone, I don't know if you want to chime in. You could take your camera, you could turn your camera on and take your mic off mute and share a few words for us, please.
I see Simone's beautiful smile.
Let me stop sharing so I can see it too, because she does have a beautiful smile, Liz.
She does.
There you go.
That's why I'm saying that's my Monday morning face, not my Sunday.
I love it.
But it's so good to be here this afternoon. This was just a phenomenal session. I'm so glad that I came. The information, the panelists, both you and Liz, such powerful navigators of the conversation. It really, really was a time well spent. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to next week. And it's so funny how, as you mentioned, all of these topics align, because I was watching with great interest how our conversation today turned down the path of EQ. Because as we started to talk about our cultures and our approaches to work and how we interact with our teams and each other, that really is what EI is all about, where we talk about self-awareness and other awareness, right? Social awareness of other people and how we manage ourselves, right? Because when you gave your examples, you talked about how you had to be open to getting feedback from colleagues and to be able to process it, take it in and learn from it. That takes great self-management and self-awareness. And then to be able to manage those relationships, when you talked about not letting her go, being able to read, first of all, the body language, and then not letting that person go without having a conversation. All of that was EI. And so I'm really looking forward to talking more about that next week.
Excellent. Thank you, Simone. Simone is doing such a tremendous job in the HR space. I mean, I have to applaud you, Simone. I mean, between the stuff through C# and, you know, your personal business and the Limitless Life Coach brand. You're nailing it. Have to give you a hats off for that.
I'm humbled to be on the platform with you all. You are doing all exceptionally well. I'm really, really proud of what's happening locally in our environment.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So one final thing I want to share very briefly, and then we are done. I see we're 3 minutes past, is if you're interested in tuning into that event, we've made it easy. There's the QR code. Turn your camera on your phone. It will take you directly to the Zoom so that you can register. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that for anyone who is interested. We know that if we make it easy, it increases your likelihood of registering. So tune in. There is a difference between IQ and EQ, and we want to make sure that all of you on this line and all of you that will watch this video through the YouTube channel are aware of how to balance both and maximize both to improve your long-term effectiveness. All right. So without further ado, we have made it to the end of our session. That was the quickest 2 hours ever, Liz.
That went by very quickly.
That went by quickly. I'm like, we planned this.
And I'm ready for more.
I am ready for more. I'm like, can we start again?
Yes, yes.
Could we start again? But thank you to our viewership for tuning in. Thank you for your participation. And I always say this, especially on a non-lockdown Sunday, where you could be doing whatever else you want to be doing with your family. We appreciate your time. And always know this, that for those individuals that purposefully invest in themselves, you will see purposeful return in your life. All right. So take care. Thank you for giving us 4 more minutes, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And hopefully you'll tune in next week. Cheers.